record button. Hey, welcome everybody. If you just joined us, Christy and I have made a bet based on her dog's weight. I have bet that her dog's final weight will be 85 pounds. She has guessed 50. Whoever is the closest without going over will get to choose the pictures in the slide deck for the next 4 presentations. Now, since this dog is under a year of age, this bet's going to go on until he meets that year mark, but we will keep you posted. Thank you so much. Now back to our regularly scheduled program. This is recorded. Thank you.
Now that we got that out of the way. All right, well, happy October. I feel like it's been a crazy month already. I went to Dreamforce. Did anybody else go to Dreamforce? Maybe pop in the chat if you were able to go. It was pretty crazy this week. There's obviously a lot of announcements and cool learnings coming out of that. So I think probably next month we can do a focus on those sort of announcements and things you need to start researching and learn about. I think that would be good. But this month, we've got special guest John Crimmings here to talk to us about security and all of the kind of proactive and immediate steps that everybody should be taking and thinking about with all this stuff. Tracy, you want to say anything else before we get started?
No, I just thank you, John, for joining us. And I would say, as is typical in our monthly meetings, feel free to bomb the chat with questions. John, I may interrupt you at points just because this is a very top of mind current issue, I think, for all of us, but no dumb questions. And if you feel like your question is dumb, just DM me on the side and I'll pretend that it's my question and ask it for you.
And we are recording, of course, so this will get posted on the YouTube channel later, and then we'll also be available on the event page that you joined from. So if you need to refer back to it at all, it'll be there. I guess we'll turn it over to you, John.
Great. Thanks, both of you. My name is John Crimmings. I live in Minneapolis, and I am a Salesforce architect at Solemn with Christy, and excited to be invited to talk about a topic that I think has been on a lot of people's mind, and just some ways to approach it very proactively, and immediately after the call you can do things and hopefully make your Salesforce orgs a little bit more secure. I was telling them before the chat started that I have a very bare bones deck, so it's going to be very no pictures or anything like that. So sorry. Specifically, I'll talk about the Salesforce breaches that have come out of these ShinyHunters data thefts, and we'll talk a little bit about who ShinyHunters are. We'll talk about how you can protect your Salesforce org from these types of attacks, and finally, we'll go through a little bit of what Salesforce is doing, and then what you as stewards of your own orgs or others' orgs need to do to kind of close the gap from what Salesforce has done. So if you haven't been familiar with what's going on, I think it's interesting, just as an aside, it hasn't gotten as much attention as I thought it would be. I mean, you see some hot headlines about millions of records being exposed from some large companies, and often these companies aren't even mentioning Salesforce when they report it happening. They're not reporting where the entry to the data came from. So this fun-sounding group of people called ShinyHunters, they're kind of a renowned cybercriminal data theft gang. They've been around for a long time, and they have been responsible for at least 91 affected companies. Last estimate I saw is about 1 billion records of data of people in Salesforce orgs at those 91 companies. And lately, they have been moving towards extortion. So they are, either asking companies, including I think Salesforce, to pay ransom in order to, get the data back, or they are setting up websites on the dark web where they are actually releasing data if that doesn't happen, if they don't get the ransomware or ransom. And it's it's a lot. It's kind of a weird, very Hollywood almost thing. And what I think is fascinating about this attack and about this data breach is that it's been completely fueled by social engineering. So what that means is that this ShinyHunters group has gone out and they've done a lot of work and looked at LinkedIn, things like that, identified people who work at these target companies who are likely to be, Salesforce admins, things like that. So they identify them, they get information about them, and then they use this voice phishing technique, which is, kind of like an email, click this link, but instead they call you up. They call an admin up. They, somehow convince them to log into Salesforce, install a connected app that they that might already be in the org, or a lot of the ones that have been tied to some clone of data loader that a lot of companies use. So they've done their research. They've been able to sort of sound like helpful people. And once they get somebody to install their malicious link, that app gets access, the keys to the Salesforce org. And then they can, a lot of times, a lot of Salesforce environments have data that's, tied to other different platforms too. So now they can go across, not just Salesforce, but other clouds that might be, within a certain company's enterprise infrastructure. So it's a big deal. And it's, like I said, what's fascinating to me is that it's social engineering at its core that's caused this. And I think why I find that interesting, is, we could talk about in the next slide here. So there's this concept in security called the shared responsibility model, and that's just a dictionary definition at the top there. But it's basically the cloud provider. It's an agreement that the cloud providers like Salesforce will secure and be responsible for the underlying infrastructure of their platforms, and their customers are responsible for everything else. So in Salesforce terms, Salesforce is responsible for the multi-tenant architecture of the orgs, the instances. They are monitoring and protecting everyone from hacking or vulnerabilities that might exist there. But when it comes to what you put into Salesforce and what you do with it, that's completely the responsibility of their customers or the owners of the orgs. And I think this is very, it's highlighted by the way in which Salesforce has responded to these breaches. That this quote at the bottom here, I'd like to think how many legal reviews it went through, but it's very specific. It says, at this time, there's no indication that the Salesforce platform has been compromised, nor is the activity related to any known vulnerability in our technology. So they're very clear, like, this isn't the platform, this isn't our technology. They didn't say it, but it's you. The answer is you. It's like, it's what's happening inside the org by how you set it up, by what you put in there. That's where this is coming from. And so why does this matter? I think that, in my experiences, a lot of people have some confusion about the shared responsibility model with Salesforce. And I think there's an imbalance. I think that people who work in a Salesforce environment understand it well enough. I think that the other IT folks within a company might not fully appreciate that when you talk about Salesforce security, that you're not talking about the underlying platform stuff. You're talking about, field level security, object level security, like those types of things. And I think that there's a disconnect often that explains why the landscape in a lot of orgs for security is confusing and full of lots of holes and gaps. I think if there was a better understanding of that shared responsibility model between the InfoSec side of a company and the Salesforce side of the company, there'd be a lot more concern about what was actually being put in place for a security model, and that doesn't often happen in my experience. And so, what's happening here is that the call here is literally coming from inside the house. Like they're literally calling somebody who has access to the Salesforce org, and they're through social engineering convincing them to install something. Which no judgment, because lots of smart people fall for things all the time. If you think that you won't fall for that, maybe it's true, but you can't rely on that. And it's happened enough at a lot of large companies where you presumably would think people were, on top of their game to protect that much data, and it still happened. So
it's not happening to only actual admins, right? It's like all these companies that have 800 admins because they have the wrong permissions, and so they really can call anybody and get the same level of access or access that they shouldn't have and be able to get in.
Yep, and that's you're ahead of my slide by like one or two. That's okay. And so because this is a human vulnerability, you can't really prevent this from happening. You can really only minimize the surface area of vulnerabilities that exist. So when it comes to Salesforce and the people within an org who have the security or permissions to do things like this, that's, to Christy's point, like where you really need to kind of start. But first, let's just talk real quickly about what Salesforce is doing. I think it's great that Salesforce has responded quickly to the vulnerability. They announced, I think it was early September, late August, that they were going to automatically roll out some changes to every org. And these most importantly include a new system permission called approve uninstalled connected apps. And then they went one step further and they automatically assigned that permission to the standard system administrator profile. They then also blocked new users from uninstalled connected apps. They're blocking apps that use this OAuth 2.0 device flow. And then, they've allowed temporary access for people with pre-existing stuff to kind of pre-existing access in order for you to like review it and not be completely disruptive. So this is good. Like it's a sign that they recognize there's a vulnerability. That's something that Salesforce themselves can do. And they've done that. So where does that leave?
John, will you remind me on those automatic updates they pushed out, is that something that you need to accept under the like update actions, or was this just rolled out for everybody? I can't remember.
That's a good question. I think it was just rolled out. I checked the org that I'm like the client that I'm working with right now. I checked their org and that was just automatically there. Okay. Someone could have pressed, accept, but it seemed pretty seamless.
Okay.
So right off the bat, like I said, it's great that Salesforce has done this, but maybe you are already thinking that there are some places where there's not a fully seamless, closing of the gap here. And so this is where I think we can talk about what people on this call can bring back and start doing to be a little bit more effective in providing security to your Salesforce environment. Christy, you sort of alluded to this already, but the first step is auditing system administrators. And I'm going to go through these each individually, so I won't go too far into this, but I think it's fair to say that a lot of environments, a lot of orgs, a lot of companies have abused system admin. And, that's a problem. It's a problem. It for the very reason, like if you have 100 system admin users, that's 100 people who are vulnerable to these voice phishing attempts to kind of like do something that would result in a breach. Another step is defining highly trusted users. So within the people who might have system admin, there might be people who aren't system admins, but there are people in your org that you work with who you can identify and educate and be in sort of like the champions of this and have them have the permission. Again, keeping the smallest number of people possible with these permissions that could be exploited. Interestingly, I think most importantly, like immediate steps, is that if you're not, like a lot of people don't use the default standard system admin profile. So if your company or your org has cloned that and created a custom system admin profile, that automatic update for that new permission did not get assigned to your profile. So this, if you're reading Salesforce's statement and you see, oh great, cool, they pushed this out to all the system admin profiles, it's important to remember that if they didn't necessarily push it to your system admin profile if you're using a custom one. So check that and update it if that's how you have your security architecture set up.
Sorry, like if you have multiple custom admin profiles, like maybe you have a junior admin profile or a only needs to do some admin things profile, like really think about, do those other levels of admins really need these additional permissions, and start looking at what permissions they have, because certainly not every admin is going to need to be able to do all these functions. So good time to start thinking about those.
I think the fourth one here, an inventory of your connected apps. I think that a lot of orgs probably have more connected apps than they realize. That can happen because people were playing around and testing something and then forgot to uninstall. It could be because a vendor came in and did something, and it's not something that people are always monitoring and always thinking to look at. And like everything else, when sometimes, I know this rarely happens, but sometimes something will get deployed to an environment and then never taken out if it's not used. Like that same thing happens with these connected apps. So just go through the connected app setup screen and walk through and really question, is this something we need? Is this something we use? And then the last two, just, I think are along the same lines here. Just once you've made these changes, once you've designed how you want to implement this, just test, validate, and then most importantly, I think monitor going forward. And I think lastly, there's a big part of this is communication. Make people aware of what is happening, how it's happened. and 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 make sure that like they understand the process if they get a phone call or if they're asked to do something.
This has brought up for me kind of my current state of autopilot, I guess, that I take on whenever we get like a new app that we need to install. Because I feel like the documentation is always so classically, hey, for this connected app, make sure you create an integration user and give them the system admin profile. And it's just been like a default wording in all this documentation for years and years and years. And so now, like at least with my org, I'm faced with the very real reality of like going back through those initial documents and being like, okay, this is what this tool does, therefore it should only have access to these things.
Mm-hmm.
But that's tedious, especially for our orgs where we have a lot to play with. In your experience, is there any way to make it less hell on earth, or is this just like the necessary evil to shore up that potential security area?
That's a good question. I mean, I think that going back to the shared responsibility model on the customer, the customer side of it, like Salesforce, I mean, doesn't do us many favors with making it efficient and maintainable to manage security and see how, like, what permissions have. It's possible. There's third parties, there are extra licenses you can get, but from everything from setting it up in one, like a sandbox, to getting it to production, that's a pain. That's difficult depending on how you've set it up. So there's part of the problem is that I think it's really difficult to monitor and maintain. That is where you start getting gaps beyond whether or not people should even have a certain profile or permission, right? What I have been kind of advocating for, trying to advocate and push for, is more of a reassessment about, starting from scratch, basically. Like, who are your users? What do you actually want them to see and do as these types of users? And I think a lot of times, we talk a lot about technical debt in Salesforce, but the security technical debt is really a quiet killer because it's so hard to track and update en masse. Not just because people move jobs, move different roles within the company. So maybe like they were a system admin and they're now something else, but they just still have all of that access. Like, it's not easy. So really going back to kind of the basics and starting kind of with a fresh approach of like the principle of least privilege, I think it's called, where start with nothing and then build back up to what they need, and then not just implement and build it that way. Document it, like have a reference that says, as this type of user, they should be able to do this, that, and this on account versus another type of user, or that within these system admins, to Christy's point, like if there's a junior admin, like they shouldn't be able to go this far. I think like taking a step back, thinking about the overall tools and levers that you have to pull within the org, and kind of rethinking is worthwhile for a lot of people, a lot of orgs. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, honestly, it helps because it confirms that the pain of it is inevitable, but it also, like that, let me finish, right? But it also confirms, like, our stakeholders, have obviously, like, ShinyHunters has, reached the mainstream, right? And so, like, I know a lot of people are getting questions from their executives being like, well, just flip a switch, and just fix our security right now. And it will help for like a communication strategy upwards to be like, it's incredibly a serious issue. There's no magic switch to flip here, and it takes the care and the cross collaboration to make this happen. Yeah, well, the old switch flipping, just make a button.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, I think the nice thing is that there are very quick, definable things that can be done to close some of the bigger gaps, at least related to this. You know, the appetite that a team or an org or a business might have for reviewing the security model depends a lot on, what else is going on at the org, at the company. But um, I think that this is a good way to bring up um, that conversation in a more meaningful way, because before there haven't been a lot of Salesforce data breaches like this, and so there's not been something that's been stuck in people's mind about, or haven't heard anything to back it up, and it might have previously sound Pollyanna-ish, or it might previously have been deprioritized because that you need to deliver some other functionality instead, right? But I think this is a good talking point to say, look, this is serious. Do you like? I think back about that TV news saying, it's 10 o'clock, do you know where your kids are? It's sort of like, do you know how many system admins have access to like everything in your org right now? And a lot of people don't.
Yeah, it's definitely as terrible as it sounds. It's been good that it's so mainstream, because now you can take this thing that's been deprioritized quarter after quarter and be like, do you want to be like Adidas? You recognize that name. Do you want to be like Chanel? You recognize that name. And it's able to move this forward at a pace that it hadn't been before, I would say.
Yeah, for sure.
I want to add there's, a couple of things that folks can do to try to make things easier, at least give you a starting point, Tracy, like running, they're on platform, they're in the setup menu, like the health check, the security checkup that will show you like you have 19 profiles that have permissions that they shouldn't have. So just running things like that to give you a jumping off point is good. But then I really think looking at other things beyond profiles and permission sets, like what are your org-wide defaults? What are your sharing rules? Because if someone is going to call me and ask me to install things, get access to records that I own, if I only can see 10 records, then that's minimizing the risk that we have. So making sure that people only have access to records that they need to see. And I would say that that's even more important if you're like in a health or life sciences, like a lot of us are in San Diego. So just making sure that we have record visibility locked down. And then, there are additional tools, which I know come at additional cost, but like own backup by Salesforce has like data mask features. I know, Tracy, you guys use like a year set and other tools to do those same things. But tools like that will also come in handy to help kind of mitigate and minimize risks. So once we go through this initial process of what are these things that need to be done, people are coming to year-end budget conversations for next year. Do we need to start thinking about these other tools that would be helpful and get those implemented? So, because money just grows on trees, so we can all just grab it and add it to the org.
Yep. Okay. I was going to go a little deeper. I think I ended up going through these but I'll just go through these quickly. Like, so, the first step here is, again, just understand who your system admins are, or your users with the most access, and kick the tires on every single one. Like, does this person need that? Does this person need that? Like, and then document like who these users are and what they actually need to be able to see. I see a question about, yes, David. Real quick, the action on custom admin profiles is that Salesforce automatically pushed and assigned a new permission to close this vulnerability to the default standard system admin, which is great. But if you're not using that as your primary system admin, then you need to add that permission yourself to that profile.
Do you
Can
know
we
off
go
the top
to name
of your head what it was called? Yeah.
Yes, it's called Approve Uninstalled Connected Apps.
There we go.
Oops, going the wrong way. Okay, and then again, like because there might be subsets within system admins or that type of the high level users, you can probably get more granular with that too, right? You can say of the 10 system admins, really want to just have this be available for 3 of them. And the reason for this is really just to, again, limit the number of opportunities for something to be vulnerable. I think that, in this case, it might be worth considering a permission set approach. If you, depending on like how many profiles you have and how many people are sharing a certain profile, but if you had a approve uninstalled connected apps permission set, you can get very granular with your highly trusted users. And you can even use expiring permission sets for something like this too, if you wanted to assign it for a period of time so that people don't accidentally have it forever. Lots of different things you can do here, but most important is just to find a group of people that's a small enough size to get the job done without creating more unnecessary exposure. Already talked about this. Yeah, I mean, I wish there was like a throwaway line in the announcement. I wish they would have like put a little bit more forward, but if you're using any type of custom system admin profile permission set to handle this in your org, you're going to need to manually add that permission. Talk
I
through
feel
this
like
too.
we should mention to you that you should do this in all of your environments. So this isn't, these aren't just production changes. You should focus on all those sandboxes you have sitting around as well, because they could be just as vulnerable.
Yeah. Or, if you're using source, like put it in source and then distribute it up all the way that way. But, good call. Nothing, I think, more here on the inventory managing connected apps. We've talked about this. A little bit about test validating and monitoring. Just obviously when you assign these new permissions to people, you want to make sure that they're working as expected. We talked a little bit about third-party tools that exist. There are a couple companies out there I know that do, more robust security monitoring and feedback on where gaps are. So that if that's something that's a possibility, and look at those. Otherwise, you can use the tools that already exist, like to monitor who has access to connected apps, who's logging in, who's particularly the session management. You want to be able to see how long it's been using. If you do have a connected app, how often it's like an active session. I did not put this SOCL query in this deck, but I do. I can share with the group later. But you can query who has access to connected users, so you can kind of understand like the set of users that already do have access, and kind of use that as your starting point for dwindling that down. And you could also monitor and build reports to keep an eye on some of these things too. Event monitoring, if you have it in your org, if you have access to that tooling, it would be great for this as well. And I think this is a big piece of it too, because it's human and it's not necessarily a technical fix to the vulnerability, but making people aware, the people who have access to do the things that could be vulnerable should know that this is happening, that this has happened, things to look out for. You might want to look into creating, if you don't have one, an access request process, so that there's an official way of doing something. If someone calls you, well, I have to follow this process instead, that kind of thing. And then just start establishing more frequent reviews. I'm sure there's so many things that probably require that we'd all be better off with quarterly usage reviews in Salesforce. And so just getting into the habit of that is going to be helpful. It doesn't take a lot of time.
I think also just on the communication part, a lot of our companies, hopefully all of them, have annual trainings and stuff you have to do for email phishing and that type of stuff. I think it's definitely worth talking to the IT organization or whoever runs those types of things to add voice phishing information in those, or at least talk to your actual end users in addition to your admins, of course, that like, hey, if you get a call, someone's trying to get into your Salesforce org, just stop. That's not okay. Hang up, report it, do whatever you need to do. But I feel like it's like the more common end users that are probably going to get this, not necessarily just admins, and those end users might not know any of this is even going on. So making sure you hit everybody. I mean, don't hit them, talk to them. Yep. No violence, Tracy.
And last thing, the big highlight has been connected apps, but a lot of people use browser extensions on Chrome that have access to, that authenticate into a Salesforce org. I've worked at places that don't allow that at all. I think that's probably smart. Some of the more famous ones or more popular ones, I think those are legitimate, especially, if you can trace them back to like a GitHub project or something like that. But where there's danger is, I don't know, someone passing you an extension that is like Salesforce Inspector and the O is a 0, right? Like, just, just be wary, right? Like, I think they're great tools. They can be really great tools, but don't just install every last one until make sure you're verifying and that they meet the standards that we're talking about here.
But also the control of that. Like, let's say you find a suspicious one, it would almost be, you'd have to work with IT to make sure that the end user is blocked from grabbing that one too. Gotcha.
Yep.
I think the extensions is a great call out. I know I've seen people with Chrome extensions that like push all your data into a Google Sheet or Excel, and there's just like data everywhere now because people push buttons and nobody knows everywhere it is, which is obviously bad.
Yeah, it's like I said, there's cool stuff, and it looks cool, but then if you think about it for a few minutes, like, should I actually be doing this? I don't know. So I'm wrapping up here. If I can just ask that you do these few things, it would be a win. Just check, start looking at your system administrators, question if they really need to be system admins. Same with your custom system admin profile, and then just make sure that your system admins, whether it's custom or standard, have this new permission. Identify your minimally viable people that are highly trusted users. Maybe a permission set is something that you can use to assign them. But again, the point is, I think, to be minimally viable on this. Like, what does it take to function with your org? The least amount of highly trusted users. And then process, like, I would also probably throw in here, education, like just education of the threat, and then process for how to handle either new approvals or flagging controls. Christy, Chris or Tracy mentioned the videos that we all have to do for security, like info security. But the thing is like they're not specific to Salesforce. I don't remember everyone doing that's specific to Salesforce. They're all very, general. And I think, there'd be value in having something like that, specific to Salesforce. And finally, just 3 takeaways. Salesforce kind of closed the door on this major vulnerability, say kind of, because there's still a few things that need to be done depending on how your org is set up, those custom profiles, I should say. It's up to the org users to close that security gap. And just being proactive through monitoring, communication, minimizing the number of people who have wide open access to things is the key to protection. So that's all I have.
That was awesome. I think we answered all the questions that were in the chat already. Does anybody else have a question or a comment or like scary story or something that happened to you already? If only they bought Agentforce, they wouldn't have been hacked.
Well, I mean, I have a sort of real world story, and I'm not meant to be critical of this group, but not this group, but the one I'm referring to. But like I when this push came out, I noticed, I work with a company that uses a custom profile for system ad, and called out the fact that we need to like update this, wondering what the process was, and I think like this group of very smart people still thought that they were like fine. Like what is the need to do this? If we have these other measures in place, and I think like the answer there is nothing is wrong with reviewing and double checking things, even if you have the most organized and structured environment and security. So it's always worth reviewing, especially as new things pop up like this.
Yeah, agreed. One of my first comments was like, I read that the average data breach cost $400 million, and then I Googled it, it's actually $4 million. So big difference. I got the 4 right, but it's definitely cheaper to start doing this proactive work and make sure that you guys are prepared versus, this happening to you and then chaos and dollars and craziness. So it's definitely worth it, even if you have to put another project on hold or, reach out to an implementation partner or something to help get the work done. You can call me and John, but
they're not plugging themselves. Ignore them. That was a joke.
But you can though. No, it's definitely worth it. And I know everyone's had these initiatives already to move from profiles into permission set groups and permission sets. So I know people are already doing this work and evaluating who has permissions to what, but I know it's a big job, and unfortunately it just has to be done. I know, Tracy, you've been working on it for months since all this started happening, and you're still going. So it is.
Yeah, that's like a good point. Like, I think one mistake that it's easy to do out of expediency is to just sort of repeat what was there and put like in a profile and put it in a permission set, right? That's a great way to get off of a profile-centric security model, but
still
again, like we talked about, like you still have that security debt. Like it's better, like you're doing it, might as well take this as an opportunity to stop and say, like, how can we do this better?
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, it doesn't look like we have any more questions, so I guess we can end there. I know our schedule was a little off this month because of Dreamforce, so we'll resume with our third Wednesday of each month next month. We're also going to try to plan an in-person thing Probably not for November, maybe for December, just so we can get one in before the end of the year. The one we did in, was it September? I don't know. No concept of time, but it was really fun. We had like 40 or 50 people there, which was great to see everybody. So cool. Andrew will be there. So we'll work on planning that. And again, the recording for this will be posted on the event page in the next couple hours or so. Sometimes it takes me a minute, but it'll be there. And thanks everybody. And thanks, John. That was
fun. Thanks. Thanks for having me.
See you
nice
all
meeting everyone.
Bye.
Bye.